Hello, this is the Arvorian Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative take about the world around me. So, feedback is immensely important, and feel free to reach out. And I can't stress enough how much I appreciate the ones that are reaching out. All right, so some of the audio platforms that I'm on Speaker, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. These are just to name a few. And also, you're interested in custom-made T-shirts, tumblers. Head on to my Shopify link and check it out. All right, so it's Friday, and I'm focusing in on all of you. So this time I'm going to focus in on, I have a lot of listeners from Spanish-speaking nations, where it be Brazil, Spain, Ecuador, Peru, where it be, the list goes on. Lesbian, the list goes on. Portugal, and so many. I appreciate all of you. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in on the Spanish language. And then I'm going to get more specific next week with, like Portugal and stuff like that. Their aspects of how it's, Argentinian, and how it's specific to that country. All right, here we go. Alright, so before I get into the facts, here are some thoughts that I have about the aspects of Spanish language, and about aspects of different languages in general here. It's quite interesting how when you go and you look and you understand how, we different, even though it seems like it's vastly different, when you get into aspects of countries and within the countries, regions, and then the territories, and then, from the U.S. side, when you get into different cities and the aspects of, even though in America, everyone, essentially speaks English because that's the root language here. But it is interesting in America, and I'm going to go on to Spanish. Thoughts about the Spanish language and how it originated and everything. There is unique dialects here when it comes to the overtones of how people communicate with the English language. Transitioning on to Spanish language, again, like I had said before, instead of saying again, like I had said before in a previous podcast, nothing is really made out of a vacuum. It comes from something. Even though you think it's, there's certain aspects of something, it's just uniquely distinct to that specific culture. Yes, it is. But that specific culture evolved it from what was originally cultivated about something. In this case, the language. Okay, so with this said, I'm going to get into the aspects of Spanish language and its origin. Here we go. All right, and of course, sources will be provided for you in this episode. Okay. AI generated response. Let's see what it says. It says, The Spanish language originated from Vulgar Latin, the spoken form of Latin brought to the Iberian Peninsula by the Romans after their occupation began in the late 3rd century. It goes on to say that regions known as Hispania and the Romans was home to various pre-Roman peoples, including the Iberians, Celtics, the Tartessians, and the Vascons, whose language left traces in modern Spanish, particularly in the toponymy and a few common words. So the Romans established Latin as the dominant language, gradually replacing local languages, although the Basque language survived in the Basque region. So following the fall of Rome, the Roman Empire in the 15th century AD. So the Roman Empire is a fascinating case study, I think, here. Because it's a benchmark for the aspects of talking about what is the cost of, and what is the measure of a culture truly being something that will withstand throughout generations. Even though the aspects of the Roman culture is still very prominent today, people look on it, reference it, there's scholarly research about it. The list goes on. There's, literature, there's art, there's fashion that is all wrapped around the aspects of Roman influences. Even the aspects of modern judicial, the systems, and the political structure is centered around the aspects of the tradition of the Roman Empire. And so it's what I say about that, even though it's withstanding for so long for the test of time of the aspects of people reflecting on it, it's also, if you dig even deeper, is a prevalent lesson to the aspects of what do you cross the line with the aspects of when you get into finding moral structure about everything, and then having a stance against that, and having order and rule about that. Where does that lie in the aspects of looking towards the fall of Rome and the upheaval, and then you get the aftermath of people still looking towards Rome and as the aspects of either to admire or to learn about, or to use it as a warning about the aspects of the development of modern society. All right, so following the fall, the Visigoths, a German people, conquered parts of the peninsula. So while the direct lexical influence on Spanish was limited, they contributed some words such as gura, war, and espia, spy. And the rule contributed to the isolation and the further development of the evolving of the Latin dialects, the vulgar Latin dialects to be exact. So the most significant influence on the language came from the Muslim Moors, who arrived in 711 AD and ruled much of the peninsula for centuries. So this period, known as the Ala and the Dalas, introduced sustainable Arabic lexicon into the Hispano-Romance varieties, although the phonology of the Spanish language was not heavily influenced by Arabic nations, Muslim nations. And it's quite interesting for the aspects of how that translates into the culture, and how it's, it explains a lot about the aspects of the thought patterns and you dig in, you understand how things work and flow about the culture of certain languages. So, for instance, the aspects of ojalá. So, ojalá, it means in Spanish, I hope. And ojalá is it's clear, it's a Arabic, tonal word. And so when I was learning this, it was quite interesting in the aspects of how you use the phrase. So every time you say ojalá, you are essentially saying you hope for something. And that is you hope for this. Ojalá, I hope this. Ojalá, I hope that. It is very prevalent, the aspects of how, when you get in the heart of the matter, when that translates outward to the culture of the Spanish dialect or the Spanish culture. So, and the tradition is very faith driven. And so to merge all these things together, it also, I think, in essence, is calling out of how prevalent the aspects of spirituality is when these things, as far as language and culture of certain, regions or, certain countries form out of, these words are the cohesive, concrete evidence of how they think. So that's something. So the development of the standard form of Spanish began in the 13th century under King Alfonso X of Castile, known as Alfonso the Wise. He promoted the use of Castilian as a language of administration and scholarship. So commissioning translation of numerous works into the Castilian, which helped establish it as the basis for the written standard. So the political prestige of the Kingdom of Castile during the reconstruction of this centuries-long effort of the reclaiming of the peninsula from Muslim rule. So it allowed Castilians to spread southward and displace other local Roman dialects, including Mozarabic. So the standard written form of Spanish was further solidified in the 16th century when the prestige of the Marid dialect became dominant. So the language global expansion began in the Spanish conquest in the Americas starting in 1492. So leading to the establishment of Spanish as the official language in numerous countries across Latin America, Spain, and parts of Africa and the United States were included with this. So the colonial administration in centers like Mexico City and Lima preserved features of Central Peninsular norm, while the port of Seville, the main link to the Americas, contributed to the spread of the Spanish features of languages in the New World. So this contracted with the indigenous American languages, which led to the incorporation of numerous loan words, primarily from the Caribbean, Central Andes, and the Mesoamerican languages. So the modern standard of Spanish was formalized by the founding of the Royal Spanish Academy, or the Real Academia of Española, in 1713, which aimed to regulate the language and standard of its use, including the consistent application of accents to mark symbolic stresses. So today, the Spanish is the world's fourth most widely spoken language, with over 500 million native speakers across 21 countries, including Spain, 21 Latin American nations, and Guinea. So it's also an official language of numerous international organizations, including the UN. So the language continues to evolve with distinct regional dialects developing in different parts of the world, particularly in Latin America. and a significant presence in the United States, where it is the most common non-language spoken at home. All right, so I'm going to dig a little bit deeper and read this blog from Newsy. So, it goes on to say, let me get into the aspects of who invented the Spanish language. So, evolving from spoken Latin, the Spanish language was invented by Christian kingdoms that they conquered in the Iberian Peninsula. That's a little bit more facts onto what I already said. So the Kingdom of Castile emerged as the dominant force of the Old Castilian Spanish, which emerged from the official language of the United Spain. So languages in the Iberian Peninsula. So each of the kingdoms, particularly the reconstruction of spoken various dialects of spoken Latin, is a descendant of formal Latin of the Roman Empire. So the various languages in the dialects of the Iberian Peninsula today, such as Spanish, Catalan, Portuguese, and excuse me for the pronunciation of that, the Galilean, can be traced back to these competing kingdoms. Now, it's also interesting with the aspects of Spanish versus Latin. So, what I'm remembering, what I'm thinking of is this. So, particularly Spanish, the Spanish dialect is supposed to be spoken in phrases for the common people, and the Latin was specifically housed for the intellectual. So that again, in the aspects of what I was saying, languages really, are a highlighter about the aspects of culture and value. So, this is even more examples and proof about the aspects of how when you pay attention to to where languages originate and the reasons why they originate, they really explain a lot about the value and the thought process behind why this language is used for certain reasons and why other languages are used for certain reasons, and it gives a mentality of stature when it comes to it. In this case, class stature, and then and that also in itself says a lot about the aspects of how, at the heart of the matter, when you break down the aspects that, most of the time people do not care about the aspects of race and the aspects of all of these things. It just doesn't matter. If people are being very honest and, have really real conversations, which most people want to do that. Class structure is the prevalent focus about mostly everything when you come to terms. When it comes to interpersonal relationship, business relationships, so the list goes on, and that's just one of those truths that is very real, and it's sad to say that. We wish wishful thinking that, everybody can just have their mentality. Nobody's above or beneath anyone, but, that's just not the way of the world. And, when you see languages evolving to that distinction to say these things clearly, that says a whole lot too. All right, so, it says over time these kingdoms recognize the Iberian Peninsula parallel to each other from north and the south. Consequently, the languages in the Iberian Peninsula show a striking east-west pattern like a layered cake. So Portuguese is spoken in a strip of land in the west of the Iberian Peninsula. It is not surprising that the Old Portuguese is also known as the Galilean Portuguese or the medieval Galilean, as these languages are closely related. So similarly, The Catalan is primarily spoken on the thin strip of the east coast of Spain, while in the center of the peninsula was occupied by Leonese, Castilian, and the Aragonese. So, how did the Spanish language change over time? Modern Spanish is the product of the 700-year history since it emerged from spoken Latin. So now Spanish shows substantial Arabic influences and notable differences in grammar and vocabulary between various speaking regions. So it goes on to say, again, how, like I was saying, how, and then when I was saying about the English language, how different colonial and influences from different regions and cultures influence the dialect and words that are introduced into the vocabulary. All right, so go on, mentioning vocabulary. Let's hear what they have to say about this. So Mexican Spanish, for example, has been heavily influenced by indigenous languages as well as its closeness to the U.S. The influence of American English is especially present in vocabulary and technology, for example. So like the difference between the cell phone in American English and the mobile phone in British English, the Atlantic separates the Mexican teléfono celular from the Spanish teléfono móvil, which is another example. So while your computer is el ordenador, in Spain, Mexicans refer to la computadora. So while the remote control is el mando, a distinta, in Spain, Mexicans speak of el control remoto. So in contrast, we see the indigenous influences in Mexican Spanish when we turn towards the kitchen. So as Spanish colonialists settled in Mexico, they relied on local cuisine, and these words for food items were still visible today. A turkey in Spain is un pavo, while it is gota. Excuse me for the pronunciation. Gutaco. I'm trying my best here. And those who know what I'm saying, the Mexican dialect for that, feel free to reach out to me. And pesas at gostansis in Spain, but chicharrones in Mexico. All right, so if you want to hear more about this, feel free to check out that link. All right, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light, and of course, I'd like to know feedback, and feel free to reach out. Tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. Bye-bye for now.